There's two sets of apps. The Prezi is what I use to present the slides with, right? So, oh, by the way, we are, because we're already approaching the end of the SEM, you guys only have one module left, right? It's only module 5 that's left. It will be released in a couple of weeks. And module 5 really is more about you working on a project than actually just than reading. So a lot of module 5 is more of consultation work. So we may not have sync classes like this, but instead we'll have scheduled consultations with you guys. So that's because yeah, it's more concerned about your output than reading stuff. Okay, so today, because we're on module 4, right? Today we're talking about you and me against globalization, right? And the reason why I chose that title is because it's it's the theme of that module, right? That we wanted to talk about how globalization affects the individual, the person, right? Because the thing about it is globalization is such a big, right? Big, uh, far-reaching event or system that it sometimes misses what happens to the person, right? What happens to the individual who lives their lives in the midst of this. And one of the things that we have to realize about globalization is we live in this world, right? An interconnected, interdependent, hyper-informed, and hypersensitive world. And these are things that I think you can recognize very quickly, right? That these are things that are the hallmarks of this world. I think cancel culture is a direct result of the interconnectedness and the hyper-informed nature of people. Right? And I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the idea of cancel culture, right? Yes, yes. No. Show of hands if you agree. Do you agree with it though? So people are putting down their hands. Do you agree with do you agree with cancel culture? I think people are processing. What do you think? Why pa kayo? Vince is saying, it depends on the context in the sense that people who do need to take responsibility for their actions need to apologize for them. But Vince, is that cancel culture? Isn't cancel culture actually um, not about asking for apologies? It's just canceling them outright. Right? Isn't that one of the problems that we have with it? That it's not just about holding people to account, which I agree with, right? I think that's one of the good things that has happened with, um, with the internet and with social media is that we are capable. I'm going to put this back in a bit. We're capable of calling people out. You know, that's fine. I mean, I do that all the time. I'm very political on my Facebook. I do that all the time, but I do not call for people to stop, let's say, to cancel someone, to and can forget, correct me if I'm wrong, no? But canceling means boycotting, canceling means trying to prevent someone from let's say selling their products, or trying to prevent people from getting views if they're on social media personality, or watching shows if the person is a celebrity. But parang ganun yung cancel culture. It's just this attempt to um not that I mean it this way, but attempt to sabotage uh, someone. And yeah, so Sophia is saying that cancel culture does not allow people to grow. What do you mean?
Sir, kapag kunwari po, may taong kina-cancel because of their like, or because of what they did, ganyan.
Hmm.
If example, they learn from their mistakes and they try to change, ganyan, kahit naman na it's visible that they're changing or like doing better than before, parang people still see yung maling ginawa niya and then kina-cancel pa rin siya. Parang very close-minded po yung cancel culture.
Okay. Yeah. Marit is saying she's observed that, or he's observed that canceling people sometimes turns into cyberbullying. Yeah. Bea, what do you think?
Sir, naalala ko lang po yung isang topic namin sa history before because it was about political correctness and how it coincided with the cancel culture. And parang sometimes I think, especially sa generation na to na sobrang connected natin with technology and everything, we've kind of changed and muddled the meaning of actually correcting someone because people focus on calling other people out pero they stop there. So parang you just called out their wrong mistakes tapos hinayaan mo na lang. So that's kind of like counterproductive, I guess, to what the original definition of the word is. Parang it's better to correct them and maybe help them out to see what was wrong so that they can be better people in the future. Yes po.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. There is this, kasi I think to me, it's a function kasi of um the power of social media, right? That social media is in a sense very democratizing. It gives everyone a voice, an ability to get published, and ability to say what they want. And what we didn't realize when that happened was it gives people who otherwise would have been filtered, right, by things like the news media or mass media or things like that, an editorial function. Walang editorial function on social media. And so anybody says whatever they like. And that's not a bad thing necessarily because it allows more expression. But when you couple it with, let's say, wrong interpretations of things or misinformed um, understandings of things, and then you base a call, sometimes an emotionally powerful call, on an incorrect understanding of something, then it becomes dangerous, right? And for example, the idea, for example, of and I'm going to use David Chappelle because he's the most recent one that I know of, and because I like him. Uh, David Chappelle has been constantly in let's just say he has a fractious relationship with the trans community in the United States because they think he is transphobic. And Chappelle, being a comedian, will use that, right? He'll crack more jokes. Right? Why? Because it generates press. He gets more know about it. But if he and in his shows, he makes it clear he's not transphobic. What it's funny, and so he'll crack jokes. Right? But there was this clear call, for example, for him for people to stop watching shows, to stop patronizing shows. There was a call actually for people to stop subscribing to Netflix, to cancel their subscriptions to Netflix because Netflix supports and carries Dave Chappelle shows. And I was watching his latest special, and in it, he dedicates a good 30 minutes of it just to talk about his relationship with the trans community. And he um, gives a very interesting look at it that he says the 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 hostility towards him began when he was cracking jokes about the trans community earlier in his career, and it was picked up by homosexual mass media, and they, of course, wrote articles about it. They misquoted him, and then they made assumptions about him based on that show that he did. And sabi niya, ever since then, every attack that has been done to him uses the same talking points from that show, right? Never mind what he says in other shows. It doesn't matter. They just keep using the same thing. And then he says at the end, no, I talked about this before, that he had a friend who was trans and these people ended up killing her, or forcing her to commit suicide. But he was saying that the remove taking someone's livelihood away from them is akin to killing that person. And he was referring to the call, the attempt for these people to try and take his livelihood away from him. And he also referred to Kevin Hart, who was canceled in the same way. Kevin Hart lost the Oscars hosting job because of a homophobic joke that he cracked on Twitter years before. And the community rose up, raised the ruckus, and ended up costing Kevin Hart that job. And so what kind of Chappelle was saying was that you're costing people their livelihood for your cause, right? And the thing is, they say the jokes help promote violence against homosexuals, trans people. And the thing is, that claim is very similar to another claim made about, let's say, violence and video games. We don't have a real clear connection whether the jokes contribute to violence against these people. We have no proof. And to make that assumption and to say that because it does that, then you should not support them because they say this. And he was saying that, that's not right. And I kind of agree. And that's kind of the fear that cancel culture can have. It's very powerful. But right now it's being used very loosely. And what happens to that is when it lessens the legitimacy of it because it's being used for whatever. And the number two is um it keeps making it dangerous, right? I mean, what if someone decides later on that this group decides later on that Asians should be canceled, which was happening in the United States for a while. Right? Why? And that I think is to me the danger of that. And it really boils down to that last bit down there, right? Hypersensitivity. Right? That we seem to have become this people who are very sensitive about things. And really we shouldn't be. And that's a danger that I think this new interconnected world of ours presents. And that's one. Um, what does this mean for us? Well, right? Um, can we cope with our connections? I'm not a digital native. I did not grow up with this in my world, right? I did not. But like our perceptions are wider, right? And the funny thing about uh, there's this interconnected world of ours is one, our perceptions are wider, but two, at the same time, no, they get restricted, and they're not restricted in the sense that you're not allowed to see anything, but rather they're restricted in the sense that what we see is guided by certain algorithms, and they're simply based on what we like to see. Again, the idea of the echo chamber where the social media will just keep showing you what you like to see because it knows you like them. And if it keeps showing you what you like to see, then you'll stay on the platform longer, which allows them to make more money off you, right? And that's dangerous, right? You guys, these guys still read newspapers, and even online, and you don't need this if you if you don't have it. But do you guys read newspapers? Bea does. What newspaper do you read?
Joke, sir. Narinig ko do I use paper. Sorry.
Do you use paper? Yeah, I do. Newspapers, Diario. Do you read?
No, sir. Pwede
No,
crossword siguro.
crossword or the comics page. Have you guys tried? I mean, just as an experiment, no. Go to a website of if you don't have access to a newspaper, go to a website of I don't even know what they look like, so I'm gonna have a look right now of typical broadsheet, right, newspaper that we have, and instead of ay nako, ina-adblock ako. Uh, instead of uh, your normal getting your news from your social media feed, go through the newspaper and read the news, read the sections without relying on your social media feed. And I think what you'll find is because newspaper content is, I'm going back off the newspaper now, picking up the newspaper. There, okay. So what you will find is because newspaper content is curated. In other words, it's the stuff on it is chosen by people in the newspaper, the editors of the newspaper. Um, it's a different experience from your social media feed because you will see things that will not necessarily be things that social media will show you. And that was my experience kasi of accessing information when I was younger. Right? We did not have a social media feed. I did not get my news curated for me. Right. As a matter of fact, I have another now. No, I have uh, an app. Right. It's called News 360, and it's but like a lot of apps these days, News 360, the first thing it asks me is, what are your preferences? So I click whatever, right? And so what it does is it gathers articles from everywhere and shows me the articles that pertain to those subjects. So on one hand, it's convenient, right? You get to see what the things you're interested in. On the other hand, you miss out on things because it won't show you things that you otherwise would not have been looking for. So my point in saying this is that our access to information is both wider and restricted. And what that seems to do these days is it and reinforces certain beliefs and sometimes not necessarily in the right way because of this last thing at the bottom. Right? The quote unquote neutrality of images on the internet. Do you get what I mean by that? Yes? No? Maybe? I think people are waiting for me to say something. What I mean by that is how uh, an image on the internet, whether false or true, looks the same, right? Memes are essentially images that have been manipulated, essentially, right? To generate certain meanings and to uh, convey certain messages. Mm. But the original, and you've seen a lot of those things where the memes of, let's say, this person uh, is very different from the person itself or from the original context of the picture. And that happens not just in memes, but also in sometimes posts that will insist that they're legitimate. And so you have, therefore, an explosion of claims. I can't really say the arguments, but claims that people make, which are sometimes completely false. The problem is, unlike in more traditional media where these things would have been filtered through by the editors, here they go through. And because of the skill of people in terms of manipulating images and making things look authentic, then the quote unquote neutrality of the images actually helps in giving us the wrong conceptions of things, the wrong idea, right? Can you give me an example of maybe uh, an image or a meme or a story that you saw on the internet that fits that it looks authentic but actually it isn't? Instagram models. What? All of them? Most? You see their Photoshop? Right? Yes. Michaela, yes.
Sir, one thing I'm familiar with is, you know how in news stations, sometimes the things that they post on social media is a quotation. So they attach a picture of the person and then they put a quote beside it. And then I've also seen a lot of people saying, na, oh, don't believe these certain quotations because it's not something I said. And then when you see that, you're faced with, okay, so which one do I believe? Do I believe you or do I believe the news or something like that?
Yeah, especially, that's the problem in sometimes with news that they can they can misquote, right? But normally, if it's a legitimate news outlet, the news outlet will very quickly correct itself. Although sometimes they get called out, like I think Rappler got called out a bit a while back. But um, diba, if you remember, and this is very popular here in the Philippines, you have all of these celebrities endorsing Rodrigo Duterte, including I think and Bongbong Marcos now. No? So like I think the latest one, which was very quickly disclaimed, was that the Pope has endorsed Bongbong Marcos uh, for president. And I think the funny thing there is one of the ways you know it's not true is normally the grammar is bad. So for these people who make these things up, normally the grammar is wrong. So that's one way you can tell. Um, but I'm surprised that Instagram model photo thing. Okay, so a lot of them Photoshop themselves, I guess, right? Especially if they're like uh fitness people and stuff like that. But anything else, right? That looks look legitimate, but turned out wasn't. Deepfakes. How good are they now, Vince? I've seen a few, but are they getting better? A lot of them are getting pretty close. I think there's an app na nga, di ba, where you can deepfake. You can have like all these people lip syncing. Yeah, yeah, it's something like especially if you're not paying too much attention, no, on deepfake can catch you, and that that means that images have become unreliable, right? Before kasi, di ba they say photos or it didn't happen, but now you can fake the photos. So how do you prove that it happened? And now you can fake videos, right? So how do you therefore um, prove that something happened in this day and age, no? In this connected world of ours? And therefore, going back to our bigger idea, no? How does an individual deal with it? How do human beings deal with what what I'd argue to be a how do you call it, a blurring of the truth? How do you determine what's true, right? In this day and age, if you ask me, unplug, right? It's harder, it's slower, it's more tedious, but you can't fake what you see. At least not yet, right? Eventually, I guess if you If we start having eye implants which allow us access into the internet, and even what we see can be fake. But right now, unfortunately, a lot of stuff in on the internet is difficult to sort through if you don't have the proper equipment, or equipment meaning that you're properly mentally equipped to do so. How do you guys determine what's true or does it matter? Anyone? On the internet, I'm not saying naman in life, and this is not a deep philosophical question. It's more faced with the the quote unquote neutrality of images that we see. How do you figure out if something is real? Sophia, go.
Sir, sa context na lang po, let's say sa news, ganyan.
Mhm.
Um, first I look at the source kung sino yung nag-write, and then the how it's written, yung grammar, ganyan, the dates, of course. But also I think, sir, it's hard to 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 think kung totoo ba talaga o hindi, kasi sometimes we have biases on what we want to believe. So um kahit naman na totoo yun, let's say totoo yung isang bagay, but then we have our own take on it. I don't think, ayun po, parang kahit totoo siya, hindi natin iniisip na totoo siya kasi nga we have our biases then. So it's actually hard to know if it's real or not.
At least on the internet,
Yes, sir.
no? Because if it was real life, Santa Claus, for example, I hope you guys still don't believe in Santa Claus. But, if you do, I am sorry, it's not real. And you can be mad at me if you like. But diba, how do you know that Santa Claus isn't real? Because all you really need to do is stay up Christmas Eve and wait for him to arrive. And when he doesn't, he isn't. Um, but going with the same that same analogy, kasi sometimes, right? Even if you know Santa Claus isn't real, you believe in him anyway, right? Even if you know that it's your parents who will, wait for you to fall asleep and then sneak gifts into what if you have a like whatever stocking things, sneak gifts into the stocking, and then so that in the morning you wake up and then it's like, oh, it's a gift from Santa Claus. And even if you know it's not from Santa Claus, there is this satisfaction that you get getting it from Santa Claus. So it's like living a fiction, right? And I guess that's how some people um, choose to believe things. Alam mo yun? Somewhere inside them, they know it's not true. But it doesn't matter because what they believe makes them feel good politically, philosophically, whatever. And that's a very difficult thing to deal with because sometimes, for example, again, uh, the fact that Santa Claus doesn't exist is sadder than the belief that Santa Claus does. You agree? Do you get my point? It's the same point made by a certain story called The Life of Pi. You remember that? Have you guys? Do you know that I don't know, book or movie if you watched it? I'm guessing. Oh, who's this? Who parted it? Okay. Lara. Yeah, and Ryland says, I agree that we believe things that make us happy, even if we know deep down this isn't true. Yeah, but the thing is, thinking about it that way, then you realize why some people will believe in patently untrue things. Flat Earth, Trump won, Little Green, the Illuminati, other crazy theories that are out there. The Illuminati, and I'm trying to avoid talking about local stuff. Right? But you see that, no, and the interconnectedness of the world has kind of made it easier for these people, with people who believe in something that isn't necessarily true, but hey, we all believe it, and so let's kind of just get together and support each other in the falsehood of our beliefs. Uh, that's a problem, right? So this is just, and this is, we're only talking about the information aspect of globalization. Really, we're not even talking about the economic impact of globalization. Right? I'm pretty sure you've heard of that kasi before. I mean, I'm sure in like other classes, right? How has globalization affected us economically? You remember? Sophia, go.
Sir, I'm not really sure po, pero I think globalization helped, and also parang napababa niya rin yung ano, yung economy. I'm not really sure, but because maybe through globalization we tend to patronize other products better than their own, ganyan po. Parang nalilesen yung export, ganyan po.
I think, well, because what globalization did economically was it allowed global companies to farm out production. So you can have, and a good example is cars, for example. A car that is made, let's say, in Asia could have parts coming from several countries, some from Malaysia, some from the Philippines, some from Indonesia, some from Thailand, and then it's assembled somewhere else, right? And so what happens is you know, the car that you get is a global car. In other words, it's not made in one place. It's made in several places. And so that allows, more jobs, right? More jobs to be had, more people to work. But at the same time, there is the question of the reason why it's done is really because the company wants to save money. So yes, there are more jobs, but are these people being paid, the wages that they should be paid? And uh, the answer normally is, well, the global corporation avoids paying higher wages this way. So yes and no, right? So like for call centers, and call centers were a very big thing in the Philippines because it lifted a lot of families from lower levels of income. Simply because if you're a call center agent, you make X amount of money, and you get good bonuses, and so you can actually help your family prosper, right? But the wages here are still so much lower than call center agents, let's say, in the United States. So on one hand, yay. On the other hand, no. So um, that's kind of something that's interesting about globalization. And what it seems to show, globalization seems to reveal also, is the inherent um, inequality in the world, right? That there are places that just get more than others, even for the same. work. So, like an example, a call center agent. A call center agent in the United States easily earns double what a call center agent earns here for the same work, right? And people will argue things like cost of living and all that stuff. Yes, but the thing is, it's the same work, same number of hours. The guy does exactly the same thing as the other guy does. As a matter of fact, there's the added difficulty of having to do it during the time slot of the market you happen to work in. So if you're in the US, you're working between 8 p.m., right, in 8 in the evening and 5 in the morning. That's your work day. So, baliktad, diba? That's why a lot of call center agents were living this aswang existence. You know, they would literally reverse the time clocks just to cater to the market there, and yet they're still paid less than a call center agent in the United States. So, diba? There is that. It kind of reveals this inequity and this injustice. There's also the idea of how globalization has made it easier for wealthy people to become wealthier. They gain access to foreign markets. They're able to exploit foreign markets faster than local companies, right? And um, how does that affect you and me? Well, yeah, one is the influx of imported stuff, right? And imported stuff are really competitive with local stuff. But Sophia was saying uh, we tend to patronize foreign stuff more. And the thing is, foreign stuff is now cheaper than local stuff. Right? It's actually, have you ever tried? If you try to patronize local products, sometimes they're pricier than equivalent foreign products with better quality. So, yung bang, how do we do that? How do we manage that? And these are the issues now that I think globalization is bringing out. The other thing that's nice though is there is now a push towards local stuff. I don't know if you know, right? But a lot more people are more interested in exploring local production. The other thing globalization has been able to do is bring in technology that allows people to produce these things locally. So, like we have 3D printers now in the country. We have people who can cook foreign food just as well as people outside because they were trained outside. We have people who are producing fashion that's globally competitive, right? And stuff like that. Eventually, I suppose we will be able to produce technology and industrial stuff that is competitive. But you're competing against, countries that can produce it faster, cheaper, better right now. And that's the um, effect. If you bring it down to an individual level, what does that mean? That means that for a person who is working, um, and like for people like you who are in a a good university, and really when you graduate may have the option of working here or abroad. What's your decision? Will you work here? Will you work abroad? And I know some of my former students, like I have a student who's working in London, I have a student who's in the United States, I have people who have decided to go off and make their fortunes around the world. And I'm not saying that's wrong. What I'm saying is that's a choice that you have to make, right? Is it is it really worth it to stay and maybe earn less, right? Or should you go out, earn more? Neither answer is correct or wrong. It's really just a choice you make. So that's something about globalization. Although, if you watch the film that I put at the end of the module about what happens, because what he was saying was that we seem to be approaching the end of the globalization period. And partially that's because of COVID, right? So, how will that change the world again? We don't know yet, honestly. Right? We don't know yet. But I think the interesting point he made was that instead of the relationships between countries being economic, it's going to become values based. So countries will work with each other because they share the same values. So it's becoming ethical. It's becoming moral, which is not a bad thing. Right? And that should be an interesting thing to see in the future. Oh wait, that's my dog. Before we stop, before we end, do you guys have any questions?
No, sir.
No. You guys are very quiet. I don't know if I talk too much or you guys need to warm up from the break or gutom na kayo kasi malapit na. You guys okay? Okay. Just making sure. Well, some of you are okay. Other people seem to are not responding. Are you guys okay? Okay. So I'll end recording.